and the mic is yours.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Mike. Okay. I'd invite folks if they feel comfortable to share their webcam. I know it's lunchtime, so no offense taken if you're nibbling on a sandwich or taking a bite of an apple. And no worries too if you're getting your multitask on or don't feel comfortable sharing, but easier to present when you can see some faces, particularly in a Zoom meeting. So first and foremost, I'm really excited um, to present on this topic today. I think it's a frequently met point for non-technical founders. And so before getting started, I want to zero in on some key takeaways from this presentation. And if you're sometimes stricken with general forgetfulness, which is what my wife calls it, like I am, these are the things that I kind of want to drill down on today. Um, First off, I really want you to learn when and how to select a technical partner. And I want to share some tools and processes to try to prevent bad experiences from happening. And I just want to emphasize, and hopefully this is kind of a calming point for everyone, is that you 100% do not need to be technical to work with technical people. But if you can get yourself to start thinking more like a technical partner thinks, you're much more likely to have a better experience and hopefully a better digital product in the end. And just a note for folks that are considering maybe pursuing a startup of their own. The original founders of Airbnb and the Bumble app were not technical. Airbnb, which I'll talk about later in this presentation, was actually founded by a pair of graphic designers. And Bumble's Whitney Wolfe Herd was a sales and marketing expert. So no one in those two examples could code, and kind of look where they're at now these days. So there's hope for us non-engineers who are looking to be entrepreneurs. And so with all that said, I'll dive in. So a little bit about us. So as Mike mentioned, I work for a company called Near the Box. The company was founded in 2017, and it began as a one-man enterprise-based consulting operation with Adi Gandra, our CEO and founder, and my college roommate at Indiana University. And he has a computer science background and has been coding since he was like in middle school. And 2 to 3 years ago, Adi pivoted Near the Box to start working with more and more startups. And last year in July, as his business grew, he brought me on mid-pandemic, which is pretty crazy to think about, as he continued to build out his team of 6, which is where we're at today. And he's super hands-on with founders and is based in Detroit, where he's from. Now, my background is in project management and business development, and I primarily wear 2 hats. On one hat is I'm a product manager, so I face founders and innovators, and then I also face our internal team of designers, developers, engineers. And then also my second hat is being serving kind of in a partnerships capacity, where I connect with fellow folks and startup communities, startup ecosystems throughout the Midwest. And then recently, I've been learning about the Lean Stack program and have become kind of a growth and validation mentor for early founders and accelerators. And I live just north of Indianapolis in a town called Westfield. And one reason I'm super passionate about building relationships in Louisville and learning the startup community is that I actually have a bunch of family and in-laws in New Albany and in Louisville. And so our mission is pretty simple. We work with founders to build products to make a difference in people's lives, and for there to be that value we provide as an engineering partner. And our belief, or our key observation, is that there's a lack of technical partners who genuinely care about the long-term success of founders that they partner with. And so hopefully with this presentation, I'm able to arm non-technical founders with a bit of knowledge so that when they're ready to find a technical partner, they can find someone or a team that they can trust. So let's make sure we're speaking the same language. And so I'll cover a couple key terms here. And the first one is a minimum viable product, or an MVP. And for anyone who has experience working with startups or has been in a startup, interestingly, an MVP has hundreds of different definitions. So I'll just grab one that I like and kind of talk about it from there. So Eric Ries in Lean Startup defines an MVP as the version of a new product that allows a team to collect a maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. So I think this is a pretty solid definition. I think it should also mention that you're looking to gain the most validated learning about customers with the least cost, right? Because the odds are pretty high if you're a startup founder, a non-technical founder, that there isn't a ton of capital to begin with. So you got to be able to build something and learn with customers with the least effort and with the least cost. And so an MVP, ideally should help you begin to gain paying customers ultimately. It should tell you what's working, what's not working, and what's missing. And I just want to highlight that it's helpful to think of your MVP as your ugly baby, because you want to make sure with your MVP that you're focusing on your core business model, and you want to forget about unnecessary features or flawless design. Founders need to ask themselves, what is the essence of my business? And frankly, if you need 100 features to launch your MVP, you're probably losing sight of your core business model. So the next key definition is scope. So scope is the detailed, agreed upon features of the MVP. So like what does your MVP need to do? That's basically what your scope is. And it's important to note that, like, if you're working with a solid technical partner or a true technical partner, your scope should change as you're building, learning, prototyping. So don't worry about your scope changing over time. And then finally, there's the proposal, or the SOW, which is a formal agreement that includes what's in and out of scope, the financial arrangement, and the timeline. And I always like to mention that, if you're a founder, you want to make sure that you're comparing your list of requirements and what your expectations are to what you see in the proposal from your technical partner, because invariably you will have the telephone game where there's a little bit of misinterpretation that can happen. So make sure to do that quick cross-reference. So at this point, I just want to pause and see if anyone has any questions on these key definitions, and take a look at the chat before we move forward. Yes, Mike, don't get too attached to your ugly baby. That's a great comment, because I came across something on LinkedIn this morning, actually, that I really liked. And that is, with your MVP, done is better than perfect. And oftentimes there's this desire to just get things pristine for your MVP. But the bottom line is, with your MVP, you want to learn and pivot and iterate as much as you can and as quickly as possible. All right, so now that we're speaking the same language, let's talk about how to find a technical partner and what the three primary options are. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. Finding reliable technical talent can be harder than finding capital. Reliable technical talent is tough to find, and you're really placing a lot of trust in someone to build the thing that's tied to your vision. And so I absolutely recommend you ask an advisor, mentor, startup community person, startup accelerator lead, anyone around that has experience working with startups or has been in a startup to see who could be a technical partner for you. Often there's someone around that's been in your shoes or has been next to someone that's in your shoes, and they can help you provide insight. So I think referrals really work best in this situation. And the last thing you want to do if you're a non-technical founder and you have some validation is just do a Google search or a basic LinkedIn search. This is more important than you including maybe your naivete as you're looking to find a technical partner. And so what you'll want to do is you'll want to compare their portfolio or case studies, their process, what kind of support they're going to provide you, and ultimately what the price tag is, what the financial arrangement will be. And I think I want to highlight portfolio in this bullet because you want to find an example in their portfolio, ideally, that resembles your vision, because that's a great way to mitigate risk when you're worried about their capabilities. So if they've done something similar to what you're trying to do, better odds that they'll be able to move more quickly and more effectively in building your product. And then, although not the end all be all, you'll want to see in their portfolio if they've built digital products that are in the industry that you're looking to build your product in. You might notice that they have particular experience in agriculture, sports, medical devices, automotive. They might have an industry wheelhouse, though they might say they're industry agnostic, that they have more experience in than others. So let's dive into the three options. And just as a qualifier, any of these three options can work. You just have to find the right person and the right team. And each of these three options has its own pros and cons. So let's dig into the freelance developer route. And frankly, this route is going to be the most cost effective and you might get the most value. However, I would say that this is the riskiest approach because great freelancers are hard to find. And if you've met a founder who's used freelancers in the past, the odds are high that they've used a multitude of freelance developers, and that's for a reason, right? Because they're likely working on other projects at the same time, and you'll need to know how much time they're going to spend on your project, because they might even have a day job, and so they can't commit, fully with their time on your project. The next option is the CTO co-founder route, and I'll be honest, I think finding a CTO co-founder might be the best option here because you have someone that's also invested in your company and has skills and knowledge that you don't have. They can provide long-term strategy and might be able to do some of the development and coding themselves. And if you're going to go overseas and outsource some of your development, they can help manage those folks and communicate with those folks, which is a helpful value. And, there are some VCs that put some stock into the team slide of your pitch deck having a CTO or someone there on the technical side if you're looking to raise capital and your startup is product oriented. However, on the flip side, if you have the wrong CTO, you're stuck with this person for a long time. Plus, it's a hard sell to convince an experienced CTO to leave a six-figure salary with benefits to work for a startup for a quarter of their salary plus equity that might not amount to anything. So that's the hard truth. Like it's a challenge to find the right CTO partner. And if they commit to doing some of the development themselves, they might not have the specific engineering skills that your product calls for. So then that takes away some of the value that they might be able to provide. And then there's sort of the sweat equity piece, right? Like if you don't have a prior relationship with the CTO, it might be hard to find someone to trust that's gonna grind as much as you are as a non-technical founder. And then finally, there's the development company or development firm route. So on the positive side, you're now working with a team of individuals that can cover all of the functions needed to build your product. They hopefully have experience, building your type of product and can help advise you on product market fit, cost benefit analysis of certain features, product architecture, security, and UX design. And mind you, a CTO co-founder can do this as well. But this will save you considerable time to get this needed value that you need, and you might get this with a solid development company. They are less likely to drop your project or develop a faulty MVP because honestly, they have a reputation that they're accountable to. So if they leave you a crappy MVP and you give them a negative review or there's a negative reputation that's out there in a startup community, like that's really problematic for a development company. So they really do feel the need to rise to the occasion if they can. But then on the flip side, because you are getting a team of individuals and that team, might be full-time employees, a development company might be more expensive. Definitely will be more expensive than a freelance developer. So I just want to take a quick second. Does anyone have any questions on these three options before I move forward?
Where's the best place to find freelancers?
That's what I was going to ask as well, too. Maybe is there, certain sites or communities, something like that there that you might point us in the right direction for those groups?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can use sites like Upwork, like Fiverr. There's Co-Founders Lab is a place. Indie Hackers is a place to find freelancers. There's a couple different places you can look to find a freelance developer. And happy to kind of stew on that for a little bit and offline on some other options there. But I would say that those few that I just mentioned are good places to look. Cool. I will move on to the next slide here. So what is the ideal technical partner? And just to qualify, I mean, this can be a freelancer, it can be your CTO co-founder, or it can be a development company. So a technical partner builds and iterates digital products with founders. And they're going to be an extension or a formal member of the founding team. So they're integral to what you're doing. And then I think there's an important distinction to be made here between a transaction-based dynamic and a relationship-based dynamic. So a transaction-based dynamic, you're working with a service provider who's really just an order taker. So they will take kind of what's in scope up front and build you what's in scope without challenging you or being able to iterate. And I think the distinction between transaction-based and relationship-based is an interesting one, because it can be really hard if you're a first-time founder to tell as you're assessing technical partner options if that person or team is going to be more transaction-oriented or relationship-oriented. But the relationship-based dynamic is what you're looking for, and that's what you have in a true technical partner. And I would summarize a relationship-based dynamic by saying that, like, you don't want someone that's going to blindly build you what you tell them. You probably won't know as a non-technical founder how much a feature costs or how long building an additional feature will take. So there's a lot of value in having someone with experience that can kind of guide you on the strategy for longer term success, and then allow some space to pivot as you're building the product. And so I think one way of looking at this is you look out the window and you notice that your backyard is in total need of a lawn cut, and you might not feel like cutting your grass, or you maybe have a back injury, and so you need someone to cut your grass. So you could hire the 7th grader that's 2 doors down to bring his push mower over and cut the grass, or you might have a landscaping company that comes, cuts the grass, notices that you need fertilizer, asks you if you need fertilizer, notices that you need edging super badly, but is going to leave it up to you if you want to edge your yard. They can help you mulch if it's time to mulch. So there's a difference between someone who's going to build the minimum for you at a price versus someone that may charge you a little bit more, but you're getting much more value because you're getting a partner that is going to understand that your initial vision of the product is going to change as you get data and feedback from potential customers. So that's an important point. And then, so an ideal technical partner is going to care about the long-term success of the founder. So what does that mean? So they're not going to upsell you or like go out of their way to sell you on features or design that you might not need in your MVP or launch product. They're going to be flexible in dealing with scope changes as you get user feedback. So they're going to allow a little bit of latitude for pivoting as you're trying to build your product. They're going to help you avoid technical debt. So technical debt is when you build a product that's not scalable. So your code base reaches a dead end point where you're unable to add additional features. You have a ceiling on the capability of what you can do with your product. And so that's problematic. And often the order taking technical partners are going to steer you into technical debt. And many multi-time founders have experienced technical debt at one point, and it's something you want to avoid if you can. And then, I think founders often are so excited about their idea. Maybe they have initial validation and they're really ready to push forward, but they're not thinking about the long term. And the goal is to have a product that is going to be gaining paying customers and put you on a path to revenue. And so ideally, there's a plan in place, or a succession plan for you to have your own in-house team to handle your technology needs. So that should be a point of conversation, I would say, up front. All right, so we discussed the 3 options. We've talked about what an ideal technical partner looks like. Let's talk through some common issues. So you find that your product isn't validated with customers and you're not sure what features should be prioritized. So a true technical partner is going to give you that cost benefit per feature analysis. Requirements are not clearly defined and documented. In the end, features don't work as you expected. The last thing you want is to spend 3 or 4 months spending money and building a product where you get to the finish line and you realize that things don't work the way you expected them to. That's why I urge founders to be able to have the opportunity to play around and test early prototypes, as opposed to being in a silo until the very end of the project. You might find that there's poor communication with timelines. Poor communication when timelines are constantly shifting and you're missing deadlines. So, I mean, establishing timelines in technology is a challenge even for the most experienced technical partners. But communication, I think, proactive communication is a way to help alleviate the burden of missing timelines, where you're able to prioritize certain things so that you can hit the things you need to prior to a deadline. And then what if something goes wrong? So your technical partner is going to need to be there for you when you notice a bug after business hours, right before customer testing. Are they going to be there for you when something unexpectedly goes wrong with your MVP during an investor demo? I mean, you need to be supported at all times. So we've covered the common pain points. Now I want to talk about how to get off to the right start with your technical partner. So first off, I recommend that you have a really good grasp as a non-technical founder of these items before you bring a technical partner on. So you'll want to know the problem and the solution. So what is the value proposition of your business idea? You'll want to know the competitive analysis, and you'll want to know your business model and have a marketing plan. So these are sort of baseline elements to a fundamentally sound pitch deck. But from a technical partner standpoint, we typically look to partner with founders who have found initial validation before we work with them. And so initial validation can look very differently. So it can be creating a landing page and inviting customers to pre-order or trial a beta product. So the Airbnb validation example, I think, is a great one here. So it was founded by two graphic designers, and people assume that the Airbnb platform that they know today was there up front, and they were validating an initial version of the platform. But that's actually not the case. The founders created a landing page and put an ad up for their apartment because hotels were booked in California and San Francisco ahead of this big graphic designer conference. And so that was their path of validation, was that people who were traveling into town who couldn't book a hotel were open to staying at their apartment and responded to the ad. So I think that's a creative example of how you can validate. You can do surveying and interview customers and then have that feedback. You can create a Google Sheet or a Typeform survey where basically you're manually providing the service as a founder. So that's known as a concierge MVP. And that's a lot of times a great way to prove out that there's a market before you spend any money or any time looking for a technical partner. And then nowadays, there's tons of no code and low code options to build sort of like a pre-MVP, whether it's a mobile app or a web app. There's relatively inexpensive ways, and I would say non-technical founders can, with determination and with hustle, can figure out ways to get a large part of the way there to get a no-code MVP to the finish line. So that's another great way to validate.
Hey, John,
Any questions?
How do technical founders feel about no code platforms and MVPs when they are brought in then to work on the product and they see a no code? Are they happy? Are they upset? Is it easy to work with a no code once you're then trying to develop it further?
Yeah, great question, Mike. I would say that as a technical partner and what Near the Box does, we have no issue with the rise of no code and low code options for apps because it's a great if you genuinely care about founders, these tools are great ways for founders to test if their value proposition is going to work. And the worst thing that can happen is um, spending 30, 50, $70,000 on a product and you haven't done any validation. So yeah, I mean, there can be issues converting no code and low code and the features you have into a custom product, which a technical partner will build for you. Um, but I would say overarchingly, it's a win to have those in place. Any other questions out there? Cool. So requirements. So we talked about pain points, um, and we mentioned that founders can sometimes find that features aren't working the way they expected. And in our view at Near the Box, requirements um, is the language and the tools to make sure that you're on the same page. And I should say that our Near the Box requirements aren't universal to all technical partners, but they've been really effective in maintaining clarity between founders and our technical team. So often what you think you're saying to a developer, they might be understanding you very differently. And so requirements are tools that bridge the expectation gap and communication gap that can often exist. And so requirements are the essential items needed to ensure you're on the same page. And so I think the universal source of truth is a great point here because like you need something that's black and white when you might reach a point where there's a little bit of disagreement on how something looks and feels and operates. And so we highly recommend that you have these requirements in place. And then one thing here on requirements, they can be done by or with your technical partner. But our premise is that if you're a founder of a super early stage company, you should be the ones defining at least your initial vision of the product. If you start thinking about the product in terms of these requirements, it's going to allow you and your technical partner to build a better MVP and take some of the guessing out. After the initial version of these items is complete, in our view, that's where the technical partner should work with you to refine them, expand on them, and think of any edge cases. But by doing the initial work upfront as the founder, you're making sure that your vision is the one that's being followed, not the technical partner's vision. So scope list, I touched on earlier, that's the detailed agreed upon features that your product or platform needs to have. But I want to dig into user stories and wireframes. So user stories are the first step in understanding your customer or your user's experience on your platform. So it basically, in a very clear way, establishes who are the different types of users that are going to use your platform. And how is their experience on your product going to change based on certain scenarios, based on a condition or what they want to use your product for. And so here, this is a very basic Excel spreadsheet version of user stories, but it's effective because this is an HR portal where it's outlining whether you're the HR person or an employee, how your experience and expectations can change based on what you need to use the platform for. And so we recommend whether it's bullets or an Excel spreadsheet, that you very clearly understand kind of what are the core user flows for your customers to get the value that they need to get as they're paying to use your platform. And so that's really what user stories is, and we feel like it's a great place to start and worthy of being kind of what we deem as a requirement as a technical partner.
This is super interesting, John. Does the development team then utilize that I would say Excel sheet as then like a checkbox, like I have developed that pathway to create that condition?
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. So this is a great thing as you're testing a prototype to make sure that what your plan for the user experience was up front uh, actually materialized in the product. So yeah, this is a great thing for everyone to kind of cross-reference as they're testing the product to make sure that the key users are getting what they need and that their experience is dynamic based on kind of what they're clicking or what they're needing on your platform. So let's touch on wireframes. So when it comes to wireframes, we ask founders to take a pen to paper or use a site like Whimsical or Adobe XD to just do basic diagramming of what they think the site should look like. And some questions to ask is like, what are the core elements that need to be on the key pages? And then what are the key pages that the platform will need that every user will use? And with your wireframes, you don't need branding, you don't need color, you don't need design. Honestly, we've worked with founders who have literally had a blue pen and loose leaf paper, and we've met with them and we've talked through their initial wireframes. So no bells and whistles. So what you're seeing on this slide here on the left is an interesting example. I think this is what a founder could bring to a technical partner. And then the example on the right with the yellow circles, that demonstrates kind of the action that happens with this wireframe. So the technical partner will help you with annotations on like how the key elements are going to change within the wireframe on your platform. And so we wouldn't expect a founder to have like super evolved wireframes, but we would love to have like an illustration as to what your visual expectations are for the product. Any questions on wireframes? And I just want to note that like if you have any questions on any of the stuff in this presentation, I'm going to leave my email address at the end. More than happy to hop on a 30-minute Zoom and walk through any wireframes that you're working on or any user stories that you're working on. I want to be a resource for everyone out there.
I'm always a big fan of tools, John. So if you have suggestions on either the user stories or wireframes, we'd love to hear of them. I know Figma is a common one for wireframes. Any other tools that you like for either one of those?
Yeah, you can go a couple different ways. I've really enjoyed using Whimsical for wireframes lately. I feel like it's super intuitive and allows you to very quickly add buttons, add icons, add text boxes, add page sections. Whimsical is a great one that I recommend for wireframes. So I just touched on the requirements, but I mentioned earlier that communication is a common alignment problem when trying to hit deadlines. And I wanted to just provide some basic guidelines to help you guys be on the same page with your technical partners. So you need a direct contact that knows your product and requirements. So you'll depend on this person for quick, legit responses to your needs. And just as a note, I kind of serve in that capacity for Near the Box. You want to establish who the founding team reviewers and stakeholders are and ensure that the project team is parallel processing. So this is important. Like at Near the Box, we leverage both Monday.com and Asana as project management tools because we don't want there to be any dead time. While someone is reviewing something, if it's possible that the team can be working on something else, as a project manager, that's like ideal state, that things are constantly moving asynchronously if possible. Have bi-weekly meetings with your technical partner to talk through the latest project updates. I mean, I feel like a pretty intuitive thing. And then we recommend aligning with your partner on bi-monthly checkpoints along the way. And this is good to make sure that you're tracking to the overall timeline and that all parties are clear on documented scope changes. So the next two slides, I think, are just great questions to have in your back pocket as you have validation, you have a business idea, a pitch deck, like you're ready to kind of take that next step and find someone to build the thing. I think these questions are good ones to have to ask people as you're trying to get a few quotes and you're talking to people that might be able to help you build your product. So can you walk me through relevant case studies? So that's obvious. You want to acquaint yourself with their portfolio. And I just saw that chat, this recording will be available down the line here. So can you send me a list of references? So I think that's a super important one. Like there is no harm or foul by following up with those references just to see how their customers enjoyed or their expectations were exceeded by working with that technical partner. What tech stack do you plan to use for this project? What are your plans for the platform security? Who will be my chief point of contact? How many projects do you take on per year? You know, that's a big one. You want to make sure that they have the team and the resourcing, if they are taking on a multitude of projects, that you're getting the attention and the work done on your project that's called for, that you should get naturally. Do you use a project management tool for me to track the status of work? So I mentioned Asana and Monday.com, but as a founder, you'll want to be able to add comments on certain features. We leverage Slack as well. So you'll want proper tools and apps that help you get the job done that way. What is your software development methodology? So that's kind of a buzzword, but at Near the Box, we use Agile. And basically what you're doing there is you're making sure that the key stakeholders are giving their feedback in progress, that you're sprinting on the features that are most important to delivering the product. And so I think that's a good question to ask your partner as well. Will you and your team perform testing? So there's no better tester than the founder. The founder will have a magnifying glass on every corner, every space, every letter, every number on the platform. But a founder should not get a prototype that hasn't been tested by the technical partner first, because if you're getting a product and there's already 46 issues, like clearly no one's doing QA on their end. And that's problematic. Like, you shouldn't be the only ones responsible for the quality of your product. Will you create necessary documentation during the coding process? So that's a big one. Like, the goal is for this thing to grow and for you to have a product that attracts paying customers and for you to eventually have your own in-house tech team, engineering team. And if there's no documentation on how things were coded, then it's going to be a super big challenge to onboard whoever you bring on. As we grow, will you help us create a job description to hire and onboard an engineer in-house? So that's the difference between a relationship-based technical partner and a transactional-based technical partner. Like, a transactional-based partner wants to deliver the thing and then move on to the next project. But someone who cares about the relationship is not going to mind you having someone reliable that you trust on your team that you're paying a salary to. They're going to want to help you with that. So that's a good question to ask if they've ever done that before. And we're open to doing that at Near the Box. And will the actual work on this project be outsourced overseas? And that's a good question to ask. And it's not that you can't get a quality MVP with an overseas development team. But it does mean that, someone might not be able to respond to a feature question or make a feature related developer change as quickly. And so you need to know that up front as a founder. And then the last two questions in all caps here, I'd say are most important, right? Like, do they understand your business model? Like, a relationship-based technical partner will understand your business model. Would you want to get a beer with them after working a 14-hour day? Like, sounds like a silly question, but you're going to be in grind mode 3, 4, 6 months trying to build your MVP. And the last situation you want to be in is working with a technical partner who you can't stand, who you don't want to hang out with, who doesn't have your values. So try to get a sense if they're like normal, relatable people as you're sort of going through those first 3 or 4 calls, learning about them and interviewing each other. And then this last slide is the financial arrangement slide. So we really recommend that in the financial arrangement, in the contract, there's a provision and room for rapidly prototyping. So, for us at Near the Box, we finalize requirements, we rapidly prototype, and then we finalize ahead of launch. And those are our 3 phases. But so many times with transactional dynamics, there isn't room to rapidly prototype. There isn't room to change or reevaluate your scope as you're building the MVP. So make sure that that's in the arrangement. And then it might be worth exploring if the technical partner is open to being a co-founder and potentially taking a percentage of equity to offset the overall cost of building the MVP. And there might be situations where that makes sense. There might be situations where that doesn't make sense. But you might want to explore all the ways that you can, in the most, I would say, financially sound or strategically sound way, to have a financial arrangement with your partner that makes sense with your plan for capital, your existing capital to build the product. And not one size fits all. It should depend on project specs, vision, and founders capital. And you can either do kind of the fee-based approach, which is flat fee or based on hours, or you could do a monthly retainer, which we've done in the past as well. Or you can kind of mix in a percentage of equity if the technical partner is open to that. So those are kind of the key ways you can go about the financial arrangement with a technical partner. All right. So that is it. That is everything. That is 55 minutes of Fast and Fury. And at this point, with 5 minutes left, Mike and everybody out there, I'm a resource. I'm open to any questions that anyone might have.
Feel free to unmute yourself too if you'd like to speak to John directly.
John, I know this is a blanket type statement or question here, but can you help us maybe get some type of grip on some of those scenarios, like cost-wise, what some arrangements might cost, just kind of in general, whether you're talking about kind of a monthly retainer type fee, basic work, advising, or any insights there?
Yeah. So it's totally beholden to the specs of the project and the needs of the founder and what the scope is. But I would say a project can fall anywhere total cost wise between 30K and 100K. And then if that's based on kind of the different phases of building the product, because I recommend that like the total fixed fee is not charged up front when you don't have anything to touch and hold. So retainer based can work well for that. But I would say that that's the 30K to 100K. I feel like are good guardrails total cost wise. But if you're kind of breaking it out with retainers, that can be, depends on kind of how long it will take to build the product. So happy to kind of one off on that, but it really is kind of dependent on specs.
Okay. Yep. Thanks.
Hey, John, when working with a freelancer or even a development firm, is there any types of agreements or standard practices that protect the entrepreneur and the concept? I know you mentioned taking notes like in your lines of code. Obviously, that's going to be super important when transferring to the next developer. Is there I'm thinking of like worst case scenario, is there a way that a developer can kind of withhold information and therefore it's necessary to hire them again in order to, keep the project going?
Yeah. You do not want to be handcuffed as a founder and entrepreneur, and stuck with a freelancer who is kind of holding you hostage. So for us, like we ensure that the founder owns all of the code. So that should be part of the financial arrangement, that like ownership of the code framework is in the hands of the founder. Even though the technical partner is the one that's building it and doing it, who owns it, like should be the founder, unless it's sort of like a partnership kind of deal. And luckily I feel like there's like we use a legally sound and experienced template for our financial arrangements. But fortunately, usually startup communities have entrepreneurial specific attorneys that are willing to help early founders, just be another set of eyes on that financial arrangement. But yeah, I feel like make sure that they're documenting, make sure that you as the entrepreneur own the code, and then don't hesitate to ask for legal help if you're concerned about it.
Jake Miller asks, are there any risks from working with developers who like to reuse code or to use open source code? Anything we should place in a contract or to protect us?
Great question. Yeah, so I would, we are big fans of open source, and a lot of times if the open source code that's available to our team to use is technically sound, um, and it allows for efficiency, right? Which is kind of what you need, because often time is of the essence to get this thing out there and get feedback. Um, we're proponents of open source, um, but it really kind of depends on the project, and there can be some verbiage that you include in the financial arrangement if you're a little bit worried about security elements to open sourcing. Um, but for us, we feel like that's a great way to build a better product is to be up to date on the latest open source code.
Awesome. Any other questions? Great question, Jake. Well, wonderful. I'm gonna hit stop on the